about Daniel and Babylon, and then last week the Medes and the Persians came in and destroyed Babylon. So now Daniel is in Persia. And between these two stories, King Darius the Mede disappears. We think he died. We think he was probably King Cyrus of Persia's uncle and father-in-law. He married his cousin, and which was okay then, but isn't okay now. So Cyrus kind of inherited both kingdoms. The Medes had their own king, but Cyrus was the senior king. So he was in charge of things, and he set up the government. He had people over different districts and regions in his kingdom. And then he had 3 people he put in charge of all the people who were in charge of the districts. And he made Daniel the most important of those 3 people. So Daniel was essentially in charge of the kingdom. Well, the other people, the other wise men in the kingdom, didn't like that. They didn't like Daniel at all. Now, the only reason that we know of in the Bible that they didn't like Daniel is because Daniel worshipped the true God and they didn't. And that often makes people not like people who worship the true God. There's a religious conflict there. But they were probably also quite jealous, and they wanted to get rid of him. So they did some planning, and they said, what can we do? We got to get rid of Daniel. But Daniel is very, very careful. He never does anything wrong. So we can't bring him up on charges of lying or stealing or cheating or anything like that, because he doesn't do any of those things. So we can't, I know what we're going to do. They watched it, and they saw that every day, 3 times a day, he would go home, he would go in his bedroom, he would open his window that faced towards Jerusalem, and he would pray to God. 3 times a day, every day. And they said, okay, that's where we're going to get it. They went to the king, and they said to the king, you, Cyrus, you are such a great king. You're a wonderful king. You're absolutely beautiful. You're the great king. We want to make a law so that nobody can worship anybody but you, or ask anything of anybody but you, not even of the gods, except from you, for 30 days. And the king said, you know what, that sounds like a cool idea. Why wouldn't he like that, right? That makes him the most important in all the kingdom, even more important than all the gods. And they worshipped a lot of gods, so that's pretty important. And they passed the law. Daniel read the law. He knew they passed it, and he went, and he went home and he prayed, like usual. Well then, these men arrested Daniel. They came to the king, and they said, you remember that law we just passed? Your favorite here? He just prayed to a God that wasn't you. Well, the king set up, he called all his laws, and he went through, and he tried to find a loophole. Something he could do to save Daniel, because he really liked Daniel. But there was no loophole. There was nothing he could do to save Daniel. So, they went, do you need help? No, okay. They took Daniel, and the common way to punish prisoners in these days was to throw them into a pit of wild animals that hadn't been fed in a while, and let the animals take care of the prisoner. So they threw Daniel in a den of lions, and the expectation, of course, what would you have expected? You'd expect him to get eaten. Yeah. Yes, VeggieTales did the story, so he knows it. The Bible says that God shut the mouths of the lions. They did not eat Daniel. The next morning, the king, who hadn't eaten anything all night, he'd stayed up all night, he was so worried about Daniel. He came and he looked in the den and he said, Daniel, did your God save you? And Daniel said, oh, hi, king. The king lived forever. I'm great. I'm fine. God shut the lions' mouths. I slept good. Everything's fine. So they pulled Daniel out, and they took the men who had tricked the king into trying to kill Daniel. They threw them and their families into the den of lions. And the Bible says that every one of their bones was broke before they could even hit the ground. So it wasn't that the lions weren't hungry. The lions were hungry. They feasted. God protected Daniel, and he took care of him.
Yeah, he had pizza with the lions.
In the VeggieTale versions, he and the lions shared pizza, yes. I don't think they actually shared pizza. So, let's sing our song. It's different. Okay. Remember, our light is the light of Jesus growing in our heart that other people can see. Okay? This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.